Hey, it's Jared. In my last video, I shared a Substack post, and I'm going to share another one, and that is on the topic of 5 ways that I'm learning to communicate better. Now, the reason that I wrote this is because I understand that as a person who thinks systematically and loves to solve problems, I tend to lead with problems and lead with things that I think could be better. And people don't necessarily respond to that in the best way. And so I want to be a better communicator, not so that I can try and convince people of things, but so that we can better understand each other. You see, without proper context, people are going to take what you have to say the wrong way. And if you've ever found yourself in this situation where when you try to communicate, it seems to make matters worse, then maybe you'll connect with what I wrote recently on Substack. So I'm going to read to you 5 ways I'm learning to communicate better, how my good intentions often create bad outcomes. I've been doing a lot of reflecting lately on why my attempts to help often create distance instead of connection, why my observations, which I genuinely believe could be useful, land like criticism, why people get defensive when I'm trying to be collaborative. The truth is, I have some real communication patterns that make it hard for people to hear me. Not because what I'm saying is wrong, but because how I'm saying it triggers defensiveness before we ever get to the substance. So here are 5 patterns I've identified, the unintended outcomes they create, and how I'm working to change them. Number 1. I overgeneralize when I should specify. When I see a pattern or problem, I describe it broadly rather than specifically. Instead of saying, in Tuesday's meeting when we discussed the budget, I noticed we didn't have any clarity on next steps. I say something like, we tend to have meetings with no clear outcomes. I do this partially to avoid finger pointing. If I make it about we or the system, it feels less accusatory than pointing at a specific person or moment, but also because I genuinely see the pattern as bigger than one instance. The unintended outcome. People hear the generalization and immediately apply it to themselves, but in the worst possible way. We tend to have meetings without clear outcomes becomes Jared thinks I'm a bad leader who wastes everyone's time, or they hear it as an indictment of everything rather than one specific thing. He's saying everything we do is broken. Even when my generalization is accurate, such as it being a pattern across multiple instances, packaging it in that way makes people feel unfairly characterized and shuts down their ability to hear what I'm actually observing, how I'm working to improve. I'm learning to start with specific examples. In Tuesday's meeting, I noticed we ended without clarity on what to do next. Can we talk about how to build that into our meeting structure? Use I statements about my experience. I often leave meetings unclear on next steps rather than we don't have clear outcomes. Separate observation from interpretation. I noticed X happens rather than this shows that we have a problem with Y. Check my generalization. Before I say it, ask myself, am I describing a pattern accurately, or am I inflating this into a universal truth? The goal here is to help people see what I'm seeing without making them feel like I'm condemning everything that they do. Number 2, I accumulate observations instead of addressing things early. Here's what I do. I notice something that seems off or could be improved. Instead of mentioning it in that moment, I file it away. Then I notice another thing and another. I tell myself I'm being patient, giving people time, not making mountains out of molehills. But what actually happens is I build up this mental case file. And then eventually, when the pattern becomes undeniable to me, or when something finally pushes me to speak up, I present this massive collection of evidence all at once. Here's the intended outcome. When I finally do speak up, it feels to the other person like an ambush. Where's this all coming from? Why didn't you say something sooner? Have you been keeping a list of everything I've done wrong? It creates the impression that I'm secretly building a case against them. I might be holding grudges. Our relationship wasn't as good as they thought because I was noticing all these issues without saying anything. The problem is bigger than it actually is because I'm presenting months of accumulated observations all at once. What I thought was patience and grace actually comes across as passive-aggressive scorekeeping, how I'm working to improve. I'm learning to address things when they're small. Hey, I noticed specific thing. Can we talk about that? Rather than waiting until I have a pattern. Distinguish between minor and major. Not everything needs to be addressed. Some things really are molehills. But when something bothers me enough that I'm mentally noting it, that's a sign that I should probably mention it. Set a time limit. If something bothers me for more than 48 hours after it happens, I need to bring it up rather than file it away for later. Frame it as curiosity, not accusation. I noticed X. I'm curious about that. Can you help me understand what's going on? The goal. Create space for ongoing feedback rather than occasional data dumps. Number 3, I lead with problems instead of affirmation. What I do. When I'm thinking about a system, organization, or relationship, my brain naturally goes to what's not working, what could be better, where are the gaps. It's how I'm wired. I see the potential in things, which means I also immediately see the distance between where we are and where we could be. So when I engage, I often jump straight to, here's what I'm noticing that could improve. I assume the affirmation is implied. I wouldn't be here if I didn't care, and I wouldn't invest the time if I didn't see value. The unintended outcome. People don't hear the implied affirmation, they hear criticism. And when every interaction with me involves me pointing out problems, I become exhausting to be around. Even if I'm right about the problem, even if my heart is to genuinely help. It creates this dynamic where people start to dread conversations with me because they know I'm going to point out what's not working. And that makes them less receptive to the actual valuable observation I'm bringing. How I'm working to improve. I'm learning to start with what's working. Before I mention what can improve, explicitly name what I see that's good, valuable, and working well. Assume nothing is implied. Just because I care doesn't mean people know I care. Just because I see value doesn't mean they know I see it. I need to say it out loud. Ask before offering observations. I noticed a few things. Would it be helpful if I shared them? This gives people agency rather than feeling like I'm imposing my analysis. Celebrate progress. Notice and name things when they improve, when people grow, when changes happen, not just when problems exist. The goal here is to create a ratio where people experience affirmation and problem solving from me, not just problem identification. Number 4, I assume others see what I see, what I do. When I present an observation or idea, I often present it with certainty and completeness. In my mind, I've been observing this for weeks or months. I've connected the dots. I've thought through the implications, and it's clear to me. So I present it as clear, assuming others have access to the same data I've been processing. The unintended outcome? To others, it sounds like I'm being arrogant, like I have it all figured out, not interested in their perspective. He's already decided what the problem is, and sometimes can come across condescending. He thinks we're too dumb to see what he sees. Even worse, when they don't immediately agree with my observation, I can get frustrated because it seems so obvious to me, and that frustration probably shows, which makes them even more defensive. How I'm working to improve. I'm learning to show my work. And here's the pattern I think I'm seeing. Does that match your experience? Invite others' interpretations. I might be wrong about this. What are you seeing? Express uncertainty appropriately. I think X might be happening rather than X is happening. Ask more questions first. Before presenting my observation, spend time genuinely curious about others' experience. How are you experiencing this? What are you noticing? The goal. Present observations as invitations to share understanding rather than pronouncements of discovered truth. Number 5, I match my intensity to the issue rather than the relationship's capacity. What I do. When I see something that I believe is hurting people or limiting effectiveness, I feel urgency, and my communication matches that urgency. I bring intensity, thoroughness, even directness. In my mind, this is honoring the seriousness of the issue. If people are slipping through the cracks, if systems are broken, if there's potential being wasted, that deserves serious attention. The unintended outcome. But relationships have capacity. Trust has limits. People can only receive so much at once, especially if the relationship is new or still building. There's been previous friction. They're already overwhelmed. They haven't experienced enough affirmation from me to balance the hard feedback. When I bring high intensity to a relationship that doesn't have the capacity for it, I overwhelm people. It doesn't matter if I'm right about the issue, the delivery exceeds what the relationship can bear. How I'm working to improve. I'm learning to assess relationship capacity before intensity. How deep is our trust? How much have I affirmed lately? How overwhelmed is this person already? Scale my communication to the relationship, not just the issue. A relationship with shallow roots can't handle the same wind that a deep-rooted relationship can. Build capacity before making deposits. If I want to have hard conversations, I need to invest in the relationship first. Time, affirmation, presence, trust. Start small and build. Even if I see a big systemic issue, I can start with one small part of it and build from there rather than presenting the whole thing at once. The goal is to honor both the issue and the relationship's capacity to engage with it. Here's what's becoming clear through all of this. My observations aren't usually wrong, but my delivery often makes them unhearable. I'm wired to see systems, patterns, and potential, and that genuinely is a gift, but a gift poorly packaged doesn't get opened. It gets set aside or rejected. I've been focusing on being right rather than effective, and there's a big difference between those two things. Being right means my analysis is accurate. Being effective means people can actually receive and use what I'm offering. I've been asking people to do all of the work of translating my communication. He overgeneralizes, but he figures out what he actually means. He's been accumulating observations for months, but don't feel ambushed. He's leading with problems, but know that he cares. He's presenting with certainty, but hear it as an invitation. He's bringing high intensity, but don't feel overwhelmed. That's too much translation work. I need to communicate in ways that are easier to receive. I've been defending my intentions instead of owning my impact. When people get defensive in response to me, I've been quick to say, but I didn't mean it that way, or I was trying to help, or my heart was good. And while that might be true, it misses the point. Impact matters more than intent. If my communication creates defensiveness, the problem isn't that people are misunderstanding me. The problem is that I'm communicating in ways that predictably create that outcome. I can own that without discounting my value. This isn't about becoming someone that I'm not. I'm not trying to stop seeing what I see or caring about what I care about. But I can see clearly and communicate graciously. I can care deeply and deliver thoughtfully. I can be direct and build capacity first. These aren't competing values. They're complementary skills that I need to develop. Here's my invitation. If you're reading or hearing this and recognizing yourself in any way, here's what I want you to know. Your wiring probably isn't the problem, but your delivery might be. You might be right about what you're seeing, but if people can't hear you, that's valuable information. Not about them being defensive or resistant, but about you needing to develop better communication skills. This isn't about making yourself smaller. It's about making your contributions more receivable. You don't have to stop seeing problems. You need to learn how to present them in ways that invite collaboration rather than trigger defense. You don't have to suppress your observations. You need to build relationship capacity that can handle the weight of what you're carrying. You don't have to lower your standards. You need to meet people where they are and bring them along rather than expecting them to immediately see what took you months to process. And here's the paradox. The more you develop these skills, the more impact your observations will have, because people will actually be able to hear you. So what about you? Do you struggle with any of these communication patterns? How are you learning to communicate in ways that invite collaboration rather than trigger defense? I'd love to hear more about your experience down in the comment section below. Thanks so much for sitting through and listening to this. These types of conversations are hard for me just to put out there in words without having written them down. And I don't enjoy reading from a teleprompter. I don't feel like it's very real or personal. I'd rather read from you something that I've written and spent a lot of time thinking about and considering. If you're wired at all like me, you often don't get a lot of feedback because you trigger defensiveness in people. And I want to better understand if this type of information is useful to put out there or if I should just keep it to myself. So I would appreciate the feedback. Make sure to give the channel a subscribe and click that thumbs up if you enjoyed it. And make sure to check out the link below to my Substack where you can get all of these articles that I'm writing and different things that I'm processing as they become realities. And through this process of writing, I'm fleshing things out and better understanding myself. I think it is becoming a lost art, especially in an age of ChatGPT and AI. So if you want to join me, check out the link to the Substack below. Thanks again, and I hope to see you in another one soon. Take care.